So can I ask people, if there's an empty seat next to you, can you squish up please so that we can fit everybody, please? So those people with an empty seat next to you, please squish up so we can fit everyone. It's great to see so many people here. Thank you all for coming along. So my name's Vlado Perkovic. I'm now the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine here at UNSW. Today is day 10, but who's counting? Before I start today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet, the Bedegal people of the Eora Nation. Thank them for looking after this land so wonderfully for millennia and for sharing it with all of us. We're truly fortunate, in my view, to live in the best city in the world. I'd also like to pay respects to elders past, present, emerging, and also extend that to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today. Before I get into what we're going to talk about, just a quick reminder that we're going to use Slido today. We're going to have a couple of votes and we're going to have an opportunity to ask lots of questions. This town hall meeting is set up to achieve a few things. Firstly, to allow me to introduce myself to all of you and to share some preliminary insights, and then to also share with you my current thinking on how we might move forward as a faculty. And we're going to want your input today on some specific aspects of that. And then to finish up, we're going to have an opportunity for an open question and answer session, and you'll have not only the opportunity to ask questions of me, but also of the rest of the faculty leadership team who will call up when the time comes. So who am I? And I can tell you that the number one question I've been asked since taking on this role is, why on earth would you do that? And let me try and answer that question. So I'm a nephrologist, a clinician. I still do a clinic on Monday mornings at the Royal North Shore Hospital, but for the last 8 years I've been the Executive Director of the George Institute in Australia, a role now taken by Bruce Neal, who's here with us in the front row, and a clinical researcher, a clinical trialist with a substantial research program that I'm quite proud of, that I've been working on over several years. And you know, I love the job that I did, I love the work that I did. So why did I take on the role of the Dean of Faculty, despite, I can say, many people warning me about that role? And the answer is because, to me, it's an incredible opportunity. I'm here not because I love administering or managing or any of those sorts of things, but because I want to make a difference in health. And I see this faculty as having a huge capacity to make a difference to health. It already has made a large difference, as I'll try and show you, but I think we've got between us a collective capacity to achieve incredible things. So, I've not worked for a university up until the last couple of weeks. And so I thought I'll go back to the beginning and just make sure I've got my definitions right. And I thought I'd put this up. This is the Collins Dictionary, just to remind us of what is the Faculty of Medicine that I'm the Dean of. Well, this is the Collins definition of faculties. The first definition relates to your faculties, if you like, your physical and mental abilities. And that I thought was slightly ironic, but very important as well. But there are two other definitions of the faculty. There's the one that we use here, which is the group of related departments in some universities, the Faculty of Medicine at UNSW, Sydney. But I was in the US a month or two ago talking to a whole range of people in universities, and every time we'd use the word in that context, they got completely confused. They didn't understand what we were talking about, because to them, the faculty is actually the individuals, all of the staff of a university department. So actually the faculty is all of you. And when we talk about what should the faculty do going forward, I think that's important framing, because it asks the question of what's our collective purpose and what's our collective goal and our collective ambition. And these are things that I want to come back to over the course of the next hour. So to think about the future, we also need to understand the past. And I think it's important to say that we have the privilege of being part of one of Australia's great medical schools. Here is a picture of the first graduating class who enrolled in medicine at this university in 1960. And that was not a straightforward process. The Sydney Morning Herald called it a crack-brained plan. I didn't know they had crack in 1960, but there you go. But some of the words that we used to describe that first class I think are really important for us to reflect on and to use when we're thinking about how we might move forward. Pioneers, innovative, challenged, risk takers. Interesting to see that there were a number of women in that first graduating class, even as far back as 1960. This sort of progressive, ambitious, achievement-focused approach is part of the DNA of this faculty, and I think is something that we all need to embrace. Who are we today? Well, this is a sort of a summary slide that talks about who we are. We've got a number of schools. We have a number of clinical schools, the Rural Clinical School, St George and Sutherland, St Vincent's, South West Sydney, Prince of Wales, Psychiatry, Women's and Children's Health. We have the School of Medical Sciences, the School of Public Health and Community Medicine. They're important aspects of what we do. We also have a number of centres, Big Data, National Drug and Alcohol Research Centre, Primary Healthcare and Equity, and the Kirby Institute, equally important. And over the last few years, we've organised ourselves into themes. The three original themes: cancer, infection, immunity, inflammation, neuroscience, mental health and addiction. And then over the last couple of years, non-communicable diseases, and we're currently in the process of birthing a cardiovascular disease theme to collate the strength that we've got in those areas. So that's already a big group, but we're actually much broader than that. And I think one of the things that we really need to embrace is the broader collective that makes up the Faculty of Medicine at UNSW. We have 7 affiliated medical research institutes, and there are a number of people here today from those institutes: Black Dog, Children's Cancer, Garvan, Neura, Ingham, the George and the Victor Chang. These are people that are full of UNSW academics that are doing the work of this faculty, and we should embrace and support that. We also have a number of health services that are strong partners through our clinical schools, but also beyond them. South East and South West Sydney, St Vincent's and the Sydney Children's Hospital. It's a huge collective. It's a very broad group that is achieving great things, and that if we can harness the skills and capacity, I think we can achieve much, much more. Who are we in terms of people? Well, here's some numbers. We have 1,270 employees in the Faculty of Medicine, but that number is bolstered by 3,670 conjoint, visiting or adjunct academics, and almost 7,000 students that we teach. So collectively, we have, just among that group, almost 12,000 people. If we add the independent medical research institutes, we're well over 15,000 people, probably approaching 20,000 people. And if we think about the health services as our partners, we're many tens of thousands of people. We have an army of people who can work together to deliver better health outcomes. And I think that needs to be our focus and our goal. One of the things we've done over the last week or so is we've contacted all of the schools and centres, and we've asked them for some examples of the things that have been achieved at this university to improve health. And we've just started this process, and we need to do a lot more work to collect more of that information. But we also created a bit of a word cloud from the data we got back, and you can see lots of really important words and things that will resonate, I'm sure, with people across the faculty in terms of the things that this place is well known for. But just a few of the sort of achievements that we can talk about as being coming out of this faculty are Australia's first heart and lung transplant program at St Vincent's Clinical School, the first gene therapy in spinal muscular atrophy, the development of medical emergency teams, the discovery of seroconversion illnesses in initial HIV infections, and a broader program around preventing HIV that's turned it from a fatal illness into a manageable illness through the Kirby. A whole range of others in diabetes, in blood pressure and neurological disease. There's no shortage of things that this place has achieved. And I think we also need to collate and celebrate and be able to tell those stories. And one of the things I'd like to do with all of you is get information on some of these things that we've done to improve the health of people in Australia and around the world, because I think they are really important for us. What about in terms of metrics and reputation? Well, these are just some numbers. Take them for what they are. These are the rankings of our medical school in the three main ranking systems. UNSW has obviously made a lot of progress. Started off in the 90s. It's now up to either 55 or 65 on average, depending on the methodology that you used. So it's making huge progress upwards. But I think we as a medical school have capacity to do much more to improve health and to have that reflected by some of the esteem measures. In the Excellence in Research Australia assessment done last year, 13 of the 15 subjects in medicine got the top score possible, well above world standard, and we had no subjects that were below world standard. And we also topped Australian universities for the research that makes a highly positive impact on people's everyday lives in terms of perception. From a teaching perspective, we continue to have the most popular first preference course for school leavers in the state and probably in the country as a result. So there's a lot of positive things that we've done, that we're doing, that's reflected in how we're perceived. And we're, in my view, privileged to work in a university that has a very big picture and ambitious program of activities going forward. It's not only ambitious, but it's altruistic, it's idealistic, and it talks about UNSW being Australia's global university where we'll improve and transform lives through excellence in research, education, and a commitment to advancing a just society. Big words and very easy for those to become platitudes, but I think through the 2025 strategy, through the UNSW behaviours, and through some of the areas of focus that are further evolving through the recent draft update to that strategy, there's a really strong framework for us to move forward within a broader university environment that's highly supportive. So all the pieces are there. How are we going to move forward? What are some of the things that we should focus on if we're going to maximise our potential, if we're going to achieve our collective vision? And in my view, that collective vision is to improve health, and everything else is comes from that high-level ambition. Well, I think one of the areas of focus for us has to be around excellence, and I think this has always been a strength of this university. We've been proud of the excellent research that we undertake, the excellence in teaching, the excellence in clinical care that our academics provide. I think we need to continue to nurture and foster those and use that as the bedrock of which everything else really grows. Equity and diversity needs to be a very strong focus for us. It's got to be core to what we do and every aspect of what we do if we want to take advantage of the diverse perspectives and the enrichment of the work that we do that comes from that, but also make, at a purely utilitarian level, take maximum advantage of the resources that we've got with us. If we don't give high-performing staff the similar opportunities and achieve same outcomes regardless of their backgrounds or gender or racial origin or whatever else, then we're wasting resources and we're not delivering what the community needs from us. Innovation, I think, is part of the DNA, again, of this university. It has a very strong history of being quite innovative across a range of faculties. And again, I think this is something that's quite precious. It's difficult to create, but there are ways that we can support and foster innovation, and I think we really need to do that moving forward. And ambition is also very important. We can't do things that we don't try to do. We have to work, pick out the biggest, most important, most ambitious things that we can do and work to achieve those things. And if we do that, what we'll do is we'll create a big impact. And ultimately, I see that as the ultimate goal of everything that we do. We want to move the needle. We want to improve health for people in our community here, across the country, and around the world. But we're not doing this in isolation, and the environment that we work in continues to have many challenges. It has opportunities, but it also has challenges. There are regular, it would appear, funding cliffs that appear, and we saw just in the last couple of years dramatic reductions in university funding from the Department of Education, which challenge us in terms of delivering some of the sorts of things that we want to do. There are the challenges in the research grant environment with changes to the NHMRC scheme, which are going to cause challenges and create losers, and we need to find ways to support those people. But there's also opportunities through new schemes like the Medical Research Future Fund. And then, of course, there's the challenges of the ongoing burden of bureaucracy, of complexity, of all the things that take our time away from doing the things that we believe will get us to the goal that we need to get. So we need to find ways to simplify all of these things as part of what we do. So in that context, great medical school, done fantastic things, a huge collective of people who are passionate, who are motivated, who are incredibly intelligent and capable. What should we aim to do collectively? And I think today is really the start of a process that can help us decide that and then implement it over coming years. What I'd like to do is start off by agreeing across the faculty, what are our aspirations and goals? What do we truly want to achieve? And what do we want to be known for? We can't do everything. So what are the things that we think we can achieve and we want to really focus on? Falling out of that, if we agree on those aspirations, we can decide on some of the strategic priorities. What are the specific things we then want to do to help us achieve our aspirations? And from that, we can develop our operational plans about the things that we're actually going to implement to achieve our strategies. So this is a process that I want to work on with all of you over the next 6 months. And we really need all of your input and contributions to make this the best that it can be, but also to make it something that every single person in the faculty can understand, can own, can see themselves in, and can aspire to going forward so that we can achieve the best that we can. And to do that, what we've done is we've started creating some of these sort of aspirational statements, just as a draft, really to give us a straw man to start thinking about. And I'm going to show you a first draft of what those might look like today on the next slide. And there's going to be a poll now where you'll be able to vote on those aspirational statements. And what I want you to tell me is whether you think those statements are too ambitious, whether they're not ambitious enough, whether they're just right, or whether you must be kidding. Sorry, can we go back to the other slide for a moment? So I'm just going to take you through a first draft of what these might look like to help focus us and help guide us going forward. So the first point is that we must start everything from the perspective that we will improve health in Australia and globally. That's what we're here for. In the teaching, in the research, in the advocacy, in the clinical care, that's what we're trying to achieve. This medical school, by my guesstimate, has probably trained something like a quarter of all the doctors in New South Wales over the last few decades. Perhaps more, perhaps less, I don't know. But it's a substantial proportion. That's a massive contribution to the health of every person in this state. What can we do going forward to improve health not only here but globally? So the first thing is that we're a school. We teach students, we teach medical students, we teach exercise physiologists, we teach postgraduate students. And I think it's not enough for us to teach doctors and exercise physiologists and people with master's degrees or PhDs. But what we want to do, I think, is to educate innovators and leaders in health to serve our communities, because that's ultimately the goal of the training program, in my view. We want to support and celebrate the personal and professional growth of our diverse students and staff throughout their lives. So, which is, again, a different perspective. We're focusing on people not just through a narrow segment of their engagement with us, but thinking about this as a lifelong partnership. We want to lead research that improves health, focusing on areas of greatest need. And that greatest need might be an individual or a population level, but the focus has to be on improving health. Publications in the New England Journal of Medicine, in Nature, grants, successful grant applications, etc., are very important, but they're just surrogates for the real outcome that we're trying to achieve, which is to improve health. And we need to keep that in mind, I think, if we're going to have the biggest impact going forward. We want to drive partnerships with health services and industry to enable better health for our communities. Speaking to our, the incredible partnerships that we've got and the opportunities we've got with a number of health districts where just about every hospital that we're partnered with has a major capital works program either underway or about to commence. So we have the opportunity to shape the way health services are delivered into the future and help them develop into a model that may be much more productive than what we're doing today. And of course, we want to lead improvements in health policy and equity. It goes without saying that equity is a core part of what we want to achieve, but we'll say it anyway. And we also need to recognise the impact that broader policy levers can have on improving health across the community. So this is a starting point. This is something we've come up with really just over the last few days to give us a starting point. And what we want to do is really refine this. So we want all of your feedback and input in this, and what we're hoping, as I'll show you in a moment, is that by April we'll have agreed not only on what these aspirational statements would be, but what our strategies collectively should be to achieve them. So maybe now we'll go to the poll, and hopefully you've all been busily voting on whether you think each of these statements are too ambitious, not ambitious enough, or just right, or you must be kidding. And let's have a look at some of those results. So educating innovators and leaders. So a lot of people like it. Some people think we should go further. Fabulous. Give us some words to describe how we should do that. What about the next one? Supporting and celebrating personal and professional growth. So most people pretty happy. Some people saying it's too ambitious, some people saying not ambitious enough. That's probably about right. The next one, we can see it changing. Lead research that improves health. So a substantial minority, a quarter of you, think that that's not ambitious enough. Fantastic. What should it be? Let's get some feedback from you. And a similar outcome for partnerships with health services and industry. For our communities. And the next one, if we can just move on. Health policy and equity. Again, a consistent theme. Clearly, the message I'm getting from this is that there's a substantial hunger from the people here to be even more ambitious. And I think we can do that. And I welcome the opportunity to work with all of you, not only on refining these things, that's just a starting point for us, but then on figuring out what our plan is going to be to actually deliver on those and what our areas of focus are going to be to deliver on those, given that we can't do everything. So how will we do that? And we've got, if we go back here, we've sketched out a plan for the next 6 months where we're going to seek input from every single one of you as to how we might deliver this through a whole range of mechanisms. The starting point really is this meeting, and we welcome your input at the end of the session in the Q&A or subsequently by email or other mechanisms as to what we should do differently and what our planning and strategy should look like. We're also undertaking a process of visits to all of the schools and centres and institutes, both within the faculty and in our partner organisations, to get direct feedback in those places, and some of those have already occurred. In November, there'll be 2 meetings. One is a workshop with our Medical Research Institute partners, because they're, in my view, there's a great opportunity for us to leverage the work that they're doing and the resources that they've got to help us deliver collectively an ambition which can be greater than each of us might be able to do alone. And then there'll be that'll be followed by a planning day with the leadership group across the faculty to start to pull some of this together. But the other thing that's going to happen in parallel is there's going to be an opportunity for everybody to participate and to contribute their ideas and their comments and their feedback. And that will be through a mix of some face-to-face sessions that we'll be organising towards the end of November or early December. The details of that are still being worked out, but where there'll be an open invitation to people to nominate to participate in those. And we really welcome your feedback, your input, your ideas, and your thoughts and your criticisms. But also we'll look at developing some online mechanisms where we really want to harvest the best ideas we can from across the 15,000 plus people that make up the Faculty of Medicine at UNSW, so that we can create something that will allow us to achieve the most that we can achieve over coming months. Once we've gathered all of that information, it will be consolidated into a draft document, and then we're going to go around and seek input from all of you again to help us refine it, help tell us whether it's ambitious enough or not, or whether the emphasis is correct or should be changed or tweaked. So we'd look to get that done over the course of the early part of next year, and then we're aiming to launch this new plan for the Faculty of Medicine at UNSW in April next year. And we see this as really being the roadmap for how we're going to work collectively over coming years. So to help us work through that process, we'll need strong leadership and guidance from within the faculty. We're fortunate we have 3 senior vice deans who have been involved in the faculty for a while and who've got great expertise in these areas. Gary Velan is the Senior Vice Dean Education. Gary, come on up. Let's do this let's make a bit of a show of it. Sean Emery, Senior Vice Dean Operations and Research. Come on up, Sean. John Watson, Senior Vice Dean for Clinical Affairs, and I wondered whether John might have been in that photo from 1960, but then I remembered he was from Sydney Medical School, so he couldn't have been. And Jonathan Pheasant is the Faculty Executive Director, and I've asked a couple of additional people to come and help provide input into this group and help guide us through this process in an interim leadership group. And those people are Rebecca Ivers from the School of Public Health. Come on up, Rebecca, who's going to help bring a population health perspective to the planning that we do. And Brooke Griffin, who's working in the precincts group to make sure we take full advantage of the opportunities that we have across the newly developed and the expanding precincts that we partner with in order to achieve the best outcomes for health. So this is the group that will help us between now and April. At the end of April, we'll have a new plan, and then we'll have a look at what the structure of the faculty leadership team should be in order to help us deliver that plan. But I'm very grateful to these 6 individuals for agreeing to help me over the next 6 months, and I think we should give them a round of applause, don't you? So there's the leadership group. So that's where we're at the moment. We're at an early stage of the planning process. As I said, today's day 10. We've got, I think, a strong plan to help us tweak what's already a fabulous program of work across the faculty. I've been so impressed with the visits that I've already done to the schools and centres by not just the intelligence and the commitment of the people, but the passion with which they pursue their work. And I think that's something we really need to harness if we're going to achieve the best outcomes. And I look forward to working with all of you to achieve that. So on that note, we have some time for a question and answer session. We've got about half an hour, and hopefully people are sending some questions through Slido. The instructions are there. Let me see if I can find some questions. Okay, so the first question for Sean. Now you see why I did this, right? Sean, what are your thoughts about fostering translational research? Say it again. What are your thoughts about fostering translational research?
I might immediately ask for a definition of translation, a very hackneyed word, but I think in my world it includes the capacity of basic and discovery work to translate into the next iteration on a developmental path. But it relates also to the translation of research findings into policy changes, improvements in health, and direct impacts on individuals and populations. That's a very, very broad agenda. I would like to think this faculty, under the aspirational plan that you've outlined, no matter how it's modified, finds a place for all of those things to happen. We've really got to work very hard if we are going to exert influence on health outcomes to translate our findings.
Yeah. And there are specific things we might need to develop and skills that perhaps aren't strong at the moment that we might need to grow to achieve some of those outcomes. So another related question is about basic research funding and the challenges in the current national situation with basic research funding, where there are significant limits. How do you see that moving forward at this early stage, Sean, recognising that we need to go through a planning process before we can answer that fully?
So the changes to the principal funding schemes through which most of that basic and discovery work are upon us, I think it would be premature for any conclusions to be reached at this stage. But clearly there is tension that we should be aware of and try and address. My own personal view is that you definitely need discovery and basic science, because without that, the engine room to exert influence in the form of change is lost, and that would be foolish. How you go about servicing it, how you go about supporting it, nurturing it, and looking after it is something that occupies the minds of leaders around the world. I think we're going to have to accommodate a new world of funding mechanisms. I think we need to get our basic and discovery scientists, perhaps also our engineers, perhaps also people from other faculties, to be much more directly involved with the clinical communities. I think there's been a separation of the two tribes, and they've gone off divergently. I think we need to converge the conversations. It's no good pushing a piece of technology to an unmet question. I'd much rather the technology was developed around an unmet clinical need.
Clearly there has been a swing, I think, over recent years, and I think it's part of our responsibility to make sure there is adequate support for the basic science research, as you say. So that's great. Question for Gary. So there's two questions about education here that I might combine. You said little about education. That's a question to me, and I think it's a fair comment. Probably education's not an area where I've got a strong background, but it's certainly something that I'm very passionate about and see as a key part of what we want to do, which brings us to the question, where do you prioritise education in medicine and the medical sciences? So I might answer that one, Gary, and then I'll give you the next one, which is what are the plans to improve the curriculum by exploring new disciplines students will encounter? Transgender medicine, climate change and disaster medicine are a few examples given here. I think that education is absolutely crucial, and the US trip that I referred to earlier was a trip where I went to visit with Jonathan half a dozen of the leading medical schools, the most innovative medical schools, not necessarily the most prestigious, but the most innovative medical schools across the US, to look at what they were doing and look at some of the initiatives that they'd put in place. And I think it's fair to say, Jonathan, there was probably only one medical school of those 6 that was still giving any lectures at all, that they'd moved entirely away from lecture-based learning to online materials, etc. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from that, and I think a key part of this planning process is to think about what we want to do in education. I think we've got a fabulous course that's already delivering great outcomes, but the world is changing and we need to move with it. So, Gary?
Thanks, Blado. So there are a number of ways in which we could reimagine education in the medicine program and in our other programs. I think the first of our vision statements is to drive an agenda where our students are equipped as innovators and leaders. And I think our current medical curriculum is rather traditional and doesn't really emphasise innovation or leadership. The ILP year, the year 4, engages students in research, which is great, but we don't give them any information about how to be an entrepreneurial leader. We don't tell them much about the health system and how to change it, rather than being a cog in the wheel to actually change the machine. So those are areas where we can make a difference. And with regard to the aspects that were mentioned, climate change and transgender medicine, those aspects will need to be incorporated into the curriculum as part of the reform.
Thank you. So question here about a statement, big impact requires big investment, and how does the Dean plan to resource this? So I don't think that's necessarily true. Clearly, it's much easier to make a big impact with big investment, but I think we need to be, we obviously work within an environment where research funding is going up at the moment, particularly with the Medical Research Future Fund, which offers us some opportunities, although in relatively specific fields at this stage. The NHMRC funding is not going up. There are opportunities for us to engage with industry. There are other ways that we can think about growing the funding pool that supports our work. But it's unlikely that we're going to come across a massive new pool of money. As I said to someone yesterday, there's no secret mother lode of money hidden in the faculty. I've checked since I've started. But one of the things, so we can certainly look for additional sources of funding. We can look to think about how we might better access some of those funding schemes, particularly those new ones that are coming on board. And Sean, I might get you to comment on that in a minute with some of the thinking you've been doing. There's also a question of, are we using our resources as efficiently and effectively as we can? And can we do better with the things that we've got? And I think, again, there's a great opportunity for us potentially to look at the things that we're already doing. Did you want to comment on how we might, as a faculty, better access some of the newer existing funding schemes, Sean, or do you want me to talk to that too? So, and there's already clearly a lot of work that has been done both at the level of the faculty through Sean and his team, but also at the level of the university to look at some of these new funding schemes and the changed funding schemes, and to say, how do we make sure all of our faculty have the best opportunity to access that funding? And there are a range of things that are already in place, but I think there's much more that we can do, and talking about some of these things this morning in terms of helping to improve grant applications, planning up front, making sure we take the lessons from previous schemes to help us have the best chance that we can with future funding schemes. And I think there's still quite a bit more that we can do there. Did you want to add anything to that, Sean? What's the strategy for increasing the diversity of the faculty, executive and leadership group? So it's a really important question, and I think diversity, and I know diversity is something I feel very strongly about, and it's something that I want to see really entrenched as a core culture and a core aspect of everything that we do within the faculty. I think there are some simple things that we can do and we'll look to roll out over coming months, but there's a more complex, longer term issue here about representation, about equity and access for people from a range of different backgrounds across the faculty, and that some of those are things that we can control, but that some of those are things that we need to advocate strongly for. One example of that is the NHMRC funding outcomes when broken down by gender, where there's a gross and unforgivable discrepancy between the success rates for men and women. And I think that's something that we need to work with the NHMRC to help them address and correct going forward. Are there plans for the faculty leadership to engage with the faculty? Yes. Next. So obviously this is one aspect, but a very small aspect. I'm personally going out and visiting every school, centre and institute in the faculty and every one of our locations to meet as many people as I can and hear from all of you about the things that are important to you and the challenges that you're having. And I'm sure the group here will equally be involved in some of those activities and have their own range of activities so that we hear from you and we can try and represent your goals and your aspirations to the best extent that we can. Equally, we really want you involved in some of these processes. It's very easy when you see the emails come across your desk asking you to fill out another questionnaire or contribute to another workshop to just let that slide and focus on other things. But we really need you and want you all to be engaged and tell us. We are absolutely committed to hearing what you say and incorporating that in everything that we do going forward. So there's a question here about what can or are we doing to decolonise the faculty? And I might need a bit of help here, but I believe that really is relating to issues of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health, and how we might address those and address some of the cultural issues that are present, across many of our organisations, both learning and research organisations like universities, but also some of the health services. And I don't know the answer to that question at the moment, but what I can say is I think that it's a key priority for us as a faculty, and it's something, the number of medical students that have been graduated by this faculty, I think, is something that we should all be very proud of, and is a really important start from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds, but it's just a start. I think there's much, much more than we can do. Rebecca, did you want to make a comment?
Is that on? Yes. Look, it's a really important question, but there is work that's underway. So we've got a Director of Indigenous Health Education in the faculty, Brett Biles, who's already looking at how we look at teaching of Aboriginal health and actually supporting our Aboriginal medical students. But I think it goes far beyond Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and decolonising the way in which we teach about it and how we support our students. It also goes to questions around global health, and I think it's something that we need to look at, how we do research and from what standpoint we're doing our research and whose voices are we privileging. And I think that's something that we can do better as well. So just starting to think about, in the context of our research and our teaching, who's teaching, what experience do they have, and how can we do it better so that we're more adequately or appropriately reflecting the people that we're teaching to and the perspectives that we're teaching about.
Thank you. A question here about asking, do we feel we need to bridge the gap between professional and academic staff across the faculty, and if so, how? I guess that's a question I'd reflect back on all of you and ask for your feedback on. In the short time I've been here, I've seen a great collegiality between the work of the academic and the professional staff. I love the story of the person who visited, I think it was a Dana-Farber Cancer Centre or somewhere, it's probably been changed in the telling, where they got into a lift and there was a cleaner and they asked the cleaner, what do you do? And the cleaner said, I cure cancer. And, I think that's the sort of mindset that we need to take here. We're all improving health, regardless of what role we're performing. That's the job that we're doing, and we're looking to bring the resources together, whether they're academic or professional or whatever else, to allow us to best achieve that outcome, and we should respect and incorporate everyone equally into those activities.
Vlado, can I add something to that?
Please.
Great, thanks. So I saw this question pop up and I thought it was a really interesting question. A couple of points spring to mind. One, the 12,000 number that we had on the slide actually doesn't include all of the professional staff and academic staff, but all of the professional staff mainly that support this faculty. So they are not employed under the Faculty of Medicine, they're employed as parts of the university more broadly. So that number is significant when we start to look at our colleagues across finance, IT, HR, external relations, student support, and it's incredibly important for us to consider them to be part of the faculty, to include them in conversation and to make no distinction really between our reporting line and to think about the delivery and support of our teaching and our research. The second point is, having worked across other universities, the gap is far less marked here at UNSW, and it's one of the things that actually most attracted me to, as an alumni of UNSW, to come back and work here. Is I think, yes, there is a gap, and rather than focusing on the gap, actually just recognise that academics and professional staff actually have to work together. The university doesn't exist unless we have both academics and professional staff, and we should embrace that and use the strategic planning process, and in fact use any exercise to get the voice of both academics and professional staff into that, because they're of equal importance.
Thanks. And do you want to also comment on the financial question? How are we going to pay for all this?
I was waiting for you to throw that to me straight away, and with great difficulty. But, no, look, I think there is no doubt that there is a financial challenge being experienced across the university and across medicine. But a part of those numbers, as well as 1,200, we're a $370 million faculty. So there is an extraordinary amount of financial resource already in this faculty. And rather than always looking for new, we should be thinking about, okay, well, what can we do better with the resourcing, the financial resourcing that already exists within the faculty?
Spoken like a true budget man, thank you. So, Brooke, a question about the precincts and the opportunity posed by the rebuild of the new hospitals. How do we make sure we get involved in those so that we can contribute to the thinking around the future of healthcare delivery?
Just for a bit of context, there are about 6 or 7 precincts across UNSW that we're looking at, but of course the main and the largest investment from UNSW is around the health precincts, in which there are 2. So Liverpool Innovation Precinct, which we've had a clinical school for 30 years that we'll celebrate next year. And so there's a lot of strategic activity underway with the clinical school and the broader community out there in terms of university and the LHD about what the opportunities around the Liverpool Innovation Precinct will look like over the coming years. It's also really important to say that Liverpool is not only the only opportunity in Greater Western Sydney. There's Bankstown, there's Campbelltown, the Aerotropolis around Badgerys Creek is bubbling away and will certainly surface in the coming months and years. But the biggest investment, and certainly an ambition for UNSW for 70 years, is the collaboration and partnership across Botany Road. Just to be very clear, the Randwick Health and Education Precinct is the largest strategic investment project this university has ever undertaken and will take, I think, in the coming decades to come. So no pressure. It's a massive responsibility for us to stand on the shoulders of those before us, but also look forward to how to make sure that generations after us are able to achieve and benefit the local community and beyond. How do we get involved? There's a massive amount of activity that is actually underway. It's really important to say that a lot of people think about precincts in terms of capitals, bricks and mortar, and the investment. That is critical, but what will drive the ambition and the benefit around the opportunity we have in front of us is people, a bit of glue money, but collaboration more importantly. And that's with industry, that's with government, that's with our hospital partners, our MRIs, etc. And so there's a lot of activity that is underway to try and think about. Precincts essentially gives us a springboard for new ways of thinking, innovative ways of thinking of tackling real health problems. And there's many of you I can see in the audience that are helping us do that already. What is critical to note is that although a lot of projects are born out of medicine in the precinct space, every faculty and division are contributing to interdisciplinary support and the vision of Randwick and Liverpool. So if we think about our colleagues in law, we're talking to the Kingsford Legal Centre. We're talking to science. We've got soil scientists up on campus at the moment as we speak. We're talking about the School of Optometry. We're working with art and design around the precinct creative placemaking strategy, art and culture. We're in FAS talking about social work and the education mission. So every faculty division, DECs are helping us with the branding of the precinct. Finance is helping us with a very tricky operating model and what might it look like in terms of an investment. So we touch every faculty and every division, and I think that will be a true marker of the success of the precinct. We have about 148 representatives across UNSW on the existing governance models around the precinct and UNSW. If you do want to contribute in a meaningful way, please do reach out. There are many of you that are doing that. It takes time and it takes effort, but it will be on the shoulders of many of the people in this room to the success of the precincts.
Thanks, Brooke. A related question to John about clinical academics, and the specific comment is that we face a crisis in recruitment and career development of clinical academics. What are your plans, John, to address this?
Sorry, I didn't, the acoustics aren't great. I didn't hear the first part.
We face a crisis in the recruitment and career development of clinical academics. What can we do about it?
we're now talking about the salaried clinical academics. We're not talking about what other universities call clinical academics, the honoraries.
Define your question.
Okay. Well, I think the questioner, the anonymous questioner, is probably talking about the rare breed of clinician scientists, clinical academics, I think. And that's always been a problem. It's particularly a problem in the Australian healthcare system, which is fee-for-service based. And the attraction of Macquarie Street or High Street Randwick is often overwhelming, unfortunately, or for the enterprise. We have to try, I think, to focus our attention much more on level B and level C recruitment, corresponding to junior consultant recruitment in the hospital and health services. The bright, shiny object of level E's has led to a demographic pyramid that's almost inverted in some aspects of the faculty. And many of those people stay there for a long time, which also leads to difficulties in the succession planning and then the pipeline. So there's a whole lot of issues there that have just grown in many universities, not just here, over decades, but probably act as either an impediment or at the very least a lack of encouragement for people coming in at the earlier grades. The other problem is it's difficult to see how a funding system where good grants have at most a 5 to 11%, maybe 15% in a good year chance of getting funded is sustainable. That means if you just do mathematical expectation, some people might have to apply 4 to 5, 8 times to get a single grant up. I think other funding models for research is something that we should have a discussion. We could move more to an American system of employment where people like me could do a day a week of clinical work and the money goes into the faculty's coffers to drive research and discretionary projects out of a well-functioning university clinic. That would actually bring us millions that we don't have, and probably an easier road than yet again spending 3 to 6 months. I'm not saying we shouldn't do competitive grant applications, we have to, but a lot of effort goes into competitive grant applications that actually don't get up, even if they're good.
And of course we've got a broader faculty, if you like, all the conjoint and other academics, and I think they're probably a resource that we don't utilise adequately at the moment.
Yes. You could argue in a faculty with 3,600 conjoint academics, we don't have a problem of recruitment. That would be a different issue. I think it hasn't been a well-conceived, many of you would have seen the emails I've sent out recently with the so-called conjoint project. I think at best, the arrangement as between the faculty and its conjoints is fraught. If we were a company, the auditors would have heavily qualified our accounts with asterisks on the first page saying the University of Sydney did this exercise, the unpaid academics are providing something between 15 and 25, even $40 million worth of education for free, for nothing. An auditor would draw the attention of authorities to that. On the other hand, we do have lots of people who quite like having titles for various reasons. So I'm trying to recapitulate that relationship with a much clearer statement of what we would like from our conjoint population. I'm principally talking about the education ones here, not the people that Bruce is worried about in the George, with his arms crossed looking at me scarily. I'm particularly talking about the education ones to start with. We would expect anyone who wants a title from a university faculty of medicine to provide approximately 50 hours a week, 50 hours a year. I'd like 50 hours a week, but I was trained in the old system with 56-hour shifts, long before Vlado was trained, as you heard. I would expect 50 hours of service, proper service, approximately 30 hours of real teaching, 10 hours of assessment, 10 hours of mentoring. We're clearly defining that. We're clearly going to have a much more rigorous process for engagement and, more importantly, renewal, with questions like, what have you done and who can verify it? When you ask questions like who can verify, people often are often more accurate in their responses, and so on and so forth. But equally, I want to use some strategic money that I've got, and Valado has heard me say that, to go back again, particularly to level B and Cs, and find the most talented people who look like they might be earmarked for future leadership, and actually recognise that, reward that, and say, we'd like to send you, like private enterprise does, away to Harvard for the executive MBA, or to Oxford for the strategic leadership course, or to our own courses here. And we expect you to be leaders. And I would want the conjoints to feel as part of that as our paid staff, and equally gain access to everything this university has on offer in those areas. So I think the time is ripe to recapitulate the relationship, and I think we're going to be able to do that quite well.
Thanks, John. A lot to do there. So Gary, a question here about how do we improve the quality of learning and teaching in both undergraduate but also postgraduate programs? Have we got some ideas there?
It's a very broad question, Vlado. I have to say that the quality of our undergraduate and postgraduate teaching is pretty darn good, if not excellent, based on my experience and Quilt data. But there is, I think, a need to engage more with our students and to make them feel more cared for and valued. That, according to Boaz's analysis of our last medicine student experience questionnaire, that was the number one factor in deciding how students felt about their overall experience. So we need to personalise their experience and take feedback on board seriously and work with our students to develop a course that they see as being valuable to them.
Thanks, Gary. So there's a lot to do, I think, and there's a lot to come in this area of improving our teaching and training. So watch this space. I think there's some exciting stuff that we can do there. So the last question, maybe, I think we're just about out of time for Rebecca. Someone's asked about the issue of silos and how do we work to ensure we don't just stay in our own silos and duplicate things happening in other parts of the faculty. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, it's a really good question. I think population health is something that we can use to actually facilitate people coming out of their silos, because population health research and teaching is done across the faculty very well. There's an extraordinary talent and richness of both research and teaching, but actually there's a lot that we can do to bring it together and centralise things and come out of the schools and MRIs and actually start talking about it as a faculty rather than protecting our own turf. And I think there is great opportunity there. I think when we start talking about public health and we look at politicians, people think about public health often as just being about funding public hospitals, but we've got to remember that it is actually about population health, the health of populations, keeping people out of hospital, facilitating them to live healthy lives in the way in which they want to, and that's for our local populations. It's really important. We can engage through the precinct as well. It's actually engaging with the health of our local population through the precinct, but also, Australia-wide and internationally. And I think actually drawing on the strengths around population health, ensuring that we've got a really strong voice to government and to policymakers. We have such a broad diversity of research. Our voice should be far stronger than what it actually is, and I think population health will draw us together and help allow that.
Thanks very much, Rebecca, and I think we don't have time for any more questions, and I apologise to those people whose questions we didn't get to. It's great to see so much engagement and interest, and this is just one of many opportunities, I think, to have these conversations. So please keep the comments and the questions and the feedback and the thoughts coming to not only to me, but to all of the interim leadership group you see on the stage. It's an exciting time for us. I think there are challenges, but there are great opportunities for us. As the faculty of a great faculty, I think we can do amazing things together. And it's exciting to be able to spend the next few months figuring out what those areas of focus are going to be with all of you. I look forward to the contributions that each and every one of you are going to make, not only to that process, but also to improving health as the goal that we're all working towards. And I might just finish up by asking you to join me in thanking the panellists for coming up at length. Thank you very much, and we look forward to working with all of you. Cheers.